Tuesday in Melrose Mountain, Tryon, North Carolina, and it's been overcast all day, but never got beyond the 74, 75 degree temperature mark, so we're enjoying the coolness of the air and good relief from any heat that we've had in the past days. Apostles. We've looked at some of the least known, we've looked at some of the best known, and today we want to look at one that most of you would be able to answer right away when I say the apostle's name, Thomas. What do you think about the apostle Thomas? Most of you that are familiar with the scriptures have probably said Doubting Thomas. And that's a title that a lot of people have given him, but it's really not a fair title. Thomas is mentioned, of course, in all of the listings in Matthew 10, Mark chapter 3, and Luke chapter 6, and Acts chapter 1, verse 13. He's listed as one of the apostles personally chosen by Jesus. And he's mentioned 11 times in Scripture. 4 of those times just in the listing of the ones that were chosen as apostles and listed as apostles, which means there was only 7 other references to Thomas. And it gets a little confusing sometimes because we have an awful lot of the apostles that have dual names, if you will, like Simon, Peter. Sometimes referred to only as Simon and other times as Peter, Bartholomew, or Nathaniel. Names used interchangeably, if you will. Matthew versus Levi. Levi, the tax collector. Matthew, the apostle who wrote the book of Matthew. James, Jacobus. Thaddeus, Lebbeus. Judas and Jude. And Thomas, too, has dual name. Thomas and Didymus. These names are given to us through Scripture. We don't know exactly when Thomas was called, but we do know that Jesus called him. His name appears in either the 6th through the 8th place in all 3 or 4 of the listings of the apostles. We know that it's because of Scripture that we have referred to him as Doubting Thomas, yet we certainly have done that very unfairly to Thomas. In John chapter 11, verses 1 through 16, we have the story of Lazarus. Jesus is with his apostles. He's received word that Lazarus is sick, and he quickly says that the sickness is not unto death, and he waits 2 days before he decides to head out to see Lazarus. They all knew how much he loved Lazarus, and yet they were surprised that he waited 2 days. And when he does finally say that he's going to see Lazarus, Jesus says that Lazarus has fallen asleep. They believe that that means fever's broken and he's now resting well and that he's okay, and Jesus has to come right out and say, Lazarus is dead. And I'm sure most of them wondered, well, why in the world would we go now if he's dead? What can we do for him after he's dead? As a matter of fact, Jesus had been under great threats whenever he went near Lazarus and into the town. And the disciples remind him of that, saying, hey, they wanted to stone you last time you were there. But it's interesting, if you look at that account in John chapter 11 and you look down at verse 16, it is Thomas who says, and of course it also reveals to us that his other name was Didymus. It is Thomas who says, let's also go so that we may die with him, with Jesus. Not with Thomas, but with Jesus. So Thomas shows his great courage and his great faith in Jesus' leadership, that he's willing to go even at the risk of life. And that reminds us once again that when we study the apostles, that they did have some common elements, at least 11 of them. We can't include Judas Iscariot in this. But they all had courage. They all had loyalty, honesty. They were faithful. They were committed. They had leadership skills. And So we see this sincerity, this commitment to Jesus from Thomas, who we so often just call Doubting Thomas. And of course, that comes out of the story of the upper room after Jesus' resurrection, and the disciples or the apostles are meeting upstairs in the upper room, and Jesus appears to them. Now, what I want you to look at carefully when you go to that story in John chapter 20, verses 19 through 25, that when Jesus appeared to them, without them asking him to, Jesus showed his hands and his feet and his side to convince them that it was he and that he was alive again. Now that's important to remember because Thomas wasn't present. But undoubtedly the other apostles told Thomas, we've seen Jesus, we saw his hands, we saw his side, we saw his feet. And Thomas said, unless I see his nail-scarred hands, unless I see his nail-scarred feet, unless I reach my hand into his side, I'll not believe. And then, therefore, Thomas got this title of Doubting Thomas. But really, was he any different than any of the other apostles? You see, if we look at several other accounts after Jesus' resurrection, there were lots of times when the other apostles were doubting. At the Sea of Galilee, it tells us clearly there that some were doubtful. It tells us when Jesus was appearing that many times not all of the 11 were present. And recall also, in fairness to Thomas, that when Jesus did show himself to Thomas, and he reached out his hands to Thomas and he said, here, Thomas, put your hands in my nail-scarred hands. Here, Thomas, take a look at my feet. Reach your hand into my side. Thomas fell at the feet of Jesus. And he said, my Lord and my God. Have you never had a doubt about your faith? Have you never questioned whether or not Jesus was adequate for a problem or a concern that you had? Wouldn't you love to have people just go around saying that's doubting Judy or doubting Paul or doubting Sam about you? We all doubt sometimes. And so Thomas got a bad rap. He got called Doubting Thomas, and that's how most people remember the Apostle Thomas. But you see, we've had 2,000 years. We have a canonized Bible, one that we can read and see the details of Jesus' life and what he accomplished. People have tested the gospel over and over again. It's been found to be true. We have so much more to help us with our belief. Perhaps we all ought to step back once in a while when we think about Thomas and call him Doubting Thomas, to the father whose son was sick. And Jesus said, have faith, believe. And he said very earnestly and honestly, I do believe. Help my unbelief. Maybe that's what all of us should be saying today. We believe, but there's times when we have some unbelief. Situations and circumstances that we feel Jesus may not handle or cannot handle. I don't want to be called Doubting Peter for the rest of my life. I hope you don't want to be called doubting either. So let's give Thomas a break. He was honest when he said that, unless I see. And when he did see, he fell to his knees and he said, my Lord and my God. We have so much more evidence than Thomas has. We ought to be on our knees constantly saying, my Lord and my God. Your thought for the day. God bless you and have a great day.